Well, hello and a warm welcome to session 4 of our coaching series. And yes, a few things which are very different. The first most obvious thing is we're using a different platform now. So we'll be using Zoom from now on. We obviously want your feedback as well. But I think that generally the feedback I'm seeing online is that this Zoom platform is a lot more stable and will hopefully work a lot better than the WebEx system. So looking forward to getting your feedback on this new system as well. The second most obvious change is my beard. So someone actually said, yes, I can see you and your beard, wink, wink. Now, the reason for this is, as some of you know, I actually broke my ankle playing football a couple of weeks ago, which was one of those very unexpected events. And so yes, when I first broke it, it seemed absolutely fine. I thought it was just a twist, but then obviously it kept hurting a lot more. Went to the hospital and actually they found that I'd broken it, so they put in a plaster cast. They thought that I would have to have emergency surgery, but luckily that didn't happen. So yeah, just healing away at the moment. So I'm going to be in a plaster cast for about 6 weeks. So some of these personal hygiene issues kind of get put to the back burner, as it were. Some of you seem to prefer it from some of your comments, so you never know, maybe it may become a permanent feature. And thank you so much for your nice comments that you've sent me and your best wishes in terms of my ankle healing. So it seems to be healing well, so hopefully I'll be up and about soon. Good. And just to let you know, so for those of you watching the recording, we already mentioned it to everyone else who's live, we will be shutting down the WebEx system. So if you attended the last webinar series and you want the recordings of that, oops, we seem to have someone else joining who's called Ashraf Gupta. Let me just remove that person. Don't know why that's happening. If you actually have wanted to watch the recordings of the last series, or indeed the last 3 sessions, what I encourage you to do is download them from WebEx. So you would have been sent a link to all the recordings. Download this recording so you can keep a permanent copy on your laptop, because in a few weeks' time, so I believe it will be from the middle of December, the WebEx system will no longer be active. So you'll no longer be able to download those recordings of those previous webinars. Okay, and certainly webinar number 2 is the most important webinar, because that's the one where we've gone through the 7-step process. So it's very important that you have a recording of that, because in the future, whenever you need a refreshment of the 7 steps, or you want someone to lead you through it, I think that watching that again is very, very powerful. Yeah. And we'll be using the Q&A box with Zoom, so please don't use the chat window. And in the Q&A box, you have the option to ask a question anonymously. So this means it can help me when I'm reading out questions. If you don't mind me mentioning your first name, so I won't be mentioning your first name and last name, just your first name, which unless you have a really, really unusual name, people aren't likely to figure out who you are. So just going to use your first name and ask your question. But if you don't want me to even use your first name, then you can ask a question anonymously in the Q&A box, and there's an option to be able to do that. And just like normal, you'll be receiving a link to the recording of each webinar in case you can't join live. Okay, good. So I think that's all really that we need to know from a technical perspective. Apologies that I've been offline for a few weeks, but raring to go now and get back into our webinar series and give you that momentum and inspiration to achieve that recovery. All right, well, today we're going to cover some topics, and I know there's probably some questions that you've got over the last few weeks. Someone just saying the video is very blurry. Is this normal? So unless everyone says that the video is blurry, if the video is blurry, it tends to be your own internet connection. So once again, as we mentioned, what's important is when you're watching the webinar, just make sure that there's no one else in your house who is downloading large files or streaming anything on Netflix or Amazon or streaming any kind of video, because that will reduce. Yeah, because some people are saying it's blurry. Actually, some people are saying it's the video is very clear. So if the video is very clear for some people, that means that the blurriness is down to your own internet connection wherever you're based. So either bring your computer closer to your internet connection, or just make sure that no one else in your household is streaming anything large. Yeah, some people saying the visual is really good, no lags as we used to get with WebEx. Okay, all right, good. So what are we going to cover today? Well, I wanted to talk about some supporting tools to help you through your retraining. Now, when it comes to all of our future webinars, we're not going to talk so much about the 7-step process and the retraining and the different versions. And you might ask, well, why is that? It's because you already have sessions 2 and 3. So in session 2, I go through in detail how we do the 7 steps, how we do the short versions, etc. And then in session 3, I answered a lot of your questions about the retraining. So you've got those recordings to look back on. Now, I might refresh things perhaps next week, but for the moment, we're going to be covering new things to support your retraining. But just because we don't go through the retraining again, it doesn't diminish its importance in your recovery. So please keep going with the 7 steps, the short versions, the really short versions, the morning and evening meditations, your 5 rounds of doing the retraining in the morning. All of those things are important. And at the same time, as we say, do your best, leave the rest. So don't stress yourself out if you're not able to do everything. Just do what you can comfortably manage without getting more stressed about it. Yeah. And as I said, all of the content for that is in session 2 and 3 on how that's all done. So today what I want to talk about is something that's very important as we are on our journey, is pacing and then diet and sleep. And we may find that we don't get through all of the content today. Let's see how much we get through, and so we might cover some more of it next week. And pacing is incredibly important, because when we are retraining, sometimes the energy can come back very, very quickly. For some people it takes a number of weeks or months, but for some people the energy starts coming back. And because we're stopping those negative thoughts, it can be interpreted as if we are ignoring our body and saying, oh, well, it doesn't matter if I have these symptoms. I'm doing stop, 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 and then I can do whatever I want. But of course, that's not what we mean through this retraining. What we're really doing is saying, we know that these symptoms are here. We know that they exist in the body. We are not doing stop, stop, stop to remove our symptoms. We are using the interruption processes, the brain retraining. We're using it to remove our attention on those thoughts, our obsession with our bodies, scanning our bodies, worrying about our bodies. Yep. So we don't want to keep thinking, oh, I can still feel symptoms. Right, that means I must not be doing enough of the stops. The symptoms, let them be there. Do whatever they want. Why should you waste your time and energy focusing on them and thinking about them and trying to come up with a solution? Yeah, you've got far more interesting things to be thinking about in life, and so that's why we do the retraining. Now, as we're doing the retraining, what's incredibly important is that we pace ourselves. And so pacing means that we don't overdo it as the energy comes back. And we only do the activities that enable us to maintain a similar level of health. So pacing means engaging in the appropriate level of activity given how you're feeling. And that means that it's adaptive. So some days you might be feeling really healthy and really good and lots of energy, and therefore you can do just a bit more. And sometimes you won't be feeling great, so you'll be pulling back on your activity. And at the same time, I did say to you that just like charging your smartphone, when you're charging your phone, you don't just charge it up 20 or 30% and then try to use it for a whole day. You wait till it's charged up 70%, 80%, 90%, 100% before you will then use it like you used to do for a whole day. So in the same way, we wait for our energy battery to really get charged up. So initially, we keep our level of activity pretty similar to what we were doing even before we had the energy. And then over time, we very gently begin to push out the boundaries of what we're able to do. Yeah, so we're recharging our batteries rather than just using up the energy. And as we'll talk about in future sessions, the certain personality traits like the achiever, helper, approval seeker, these sub-personalities can come up within us to make us push beyond our limits and not pace effectively. But what we want to do is calm that down and stay within our energy boundary. And so that means, let's say you have a thought of, oh, I feel really tired. I don't know if I should go out today. Stop, 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 deep breath in. So you're interrupting that pattern. And then at step 6, once you've done your visualization and you've calmed that thought down, then you make what we call a calm, rational pacing decision. So you think to yourself, what's the appropriate thing to do now? Should I go out today or should I stay in? What's the appropriate thing to do? And the appropriate thing to do is where you can do that activity and maybe your symptoms increase very slightly, but it's not a huge increase in symptoms. Perhaps you feel a bit more tired afterwards, and that's okay. But if you notice that you feel a bit more tired and suddenly you have a rush of symptoms, then you've gone too far. It's too late. You've overstimulated the body again. And how do we decide in that moment when we've done too much? How do we make that decision? We all have that internal guidance system, our own little GPS in the back of our mind, if you will, which is that little thought of, oh, I've overdone it. Oh, I'm doing too much. And what does that feel like? Well, we have an overwhelming sense of too many thoughts going on in the mind. We suddenly feel quite drained and exhausted. We suddenly feel it, our minds feel quite confused and we find it difficult to think. Or we might have a particular symptom in the body. And all of these things are clues that we've slightly overdone it. And in that moment, stop everything and meditate. That's the that's the really powerful tool in that moment. Or do a soften and flow. So just to be clear, as soon as we have that internal guidance system saying, oh, I've overdone it, I've done too much, and we feel some of those symptoms suddenly coming on, drop everything and meditate or do a soften and flow. And what that will do is allow your nervous system to reset itself. Yep. Okay. So that's an introduction to how we pace ourselves. Now, how does that work in a practical way in our lives? Well, we want to find activities that engage our mind but don't push us too far. Yeah? We shouldn't be sitting at home waiting to get better. And remember, we said there are 3 R's of the Gupta Programme. The first one is the retraining. So the retraining is what we did in sessions 2 and 3, which is retraining the brain out of this perception of the body being unwell. The second R is relaxing the nervous system. So that means daily meditation to calm the nervous system regularly. The third R is re-engaging with joy. So to help us pace ourselves, sure, we have our day-to-day chores and things that we've got to do. And if that's all we can manage, the day-to-day chores of life, then that's fine. We try and enjoy those activities as much as possible. So re-engage with joy means whatever activities we have to do, can we find joy in the moment with those activities? Now, if we do have a bit more energy, then can we find activities which bring us that joy? Hobbies, creative pursuits, things that engage our right prefrontal cortex to stop it worrying. So this part of our brain, the right prefrontal cortex, is the part that gets overwhelmed with anxiety from the insula and the amygdala and becomes too hyperactive. And this part of our brain is the part that's the creative side, the right brain. And so when we engage in creative pursuits, emotionally uplifting pursuits, then that part of the brain doesn't have an opportunity in time to worry about our bodies and how we're feeling. Yeah? Okay, so I'll just share my screen. We'll just see if there's anything else that I wanted to share here. So for pacing, for people who overdo it, allow time for the body to heal, as we mentioned. And we don't want to change any activities for the first few weeks or months. And we build up activity very slowly. And another way that we can do this is actually to walk in nature. So a fantastic way of building up our energy reserves and doing things in a slow-paced way is to walk in nature. Now, I've already said we want to get out of the house as much as possible. So we can take a book, let's say, and go for a walk in our local park or on the beach or in the countryside, ideally. And as we walk gently. And once we feel a bit tired, we sit down, we open up a book, we'll read for a little while. And then once the energy comes back, then we can just walk a bit more. So we're just very gently increasing activity. Okay. And another type of pacing is you want to take a regular rest. So you mentioned every half an hour, every hour, just doing our stretching and yawning and relaxing the nervous system. So let's do that now. So we every half an hour have a little thing on our phone that tells us to do it, a little reminder, and we just yawn. Let's do that now. So we just take a big yawn, stretch your whole body, keep trying to yawn as much as possible, which stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. Maybe you can get up. I can't do that right now, but you can get up and just stretch your body and just yawn. Give yourself a good stretch. Okay, and now we just close our eyes after the stretch and just become aware of your whole body like one big energy field, and just breathe slowly and deeply for a moment through the nose. Okay, good. When you're ready, you can just open your eyes. There's someone asking, I'm sorry, but I have to ask, what on earth is Soften and Flow? Right, so meditations you've got in the app, and also there's some meditations in your audio CDs. Soften and Flow is one of the exercises in the audio CD, and it's also on day 10 of the Meaning of Life. Yeah. Yeah. And someone just sharing, yeah, sometimes that clue as to I've done too much is different for each of us. So for some of us, it's that draining feeling. For other people, it's that feeling of adrenaline where you're feeling pumped and you're really engaged in something and you're not actually pacing yourself. So that can also be a clue when your heart's racing, you're thinking, yes, I'm really into something. Yeah. So if we become too absorbed in an activity and we lose that awareness, that also can be a challenge. So some people, that means that they have to pace themselves and say, right, I'm just going to do this activity for 20 minutes and then I'm going to take a break. Or I'm going to do this for an hour and then I'm going to take a break, because they become too absorbed in things and they lose track of time, and then they don't realize they've overdone it. So that also is something where we need to start thinking about, how can we make sure that we don't push ourselves too hard? And as we're working during the day and doing our chores, we want to let go of some of those achievement or perfectionist tendencies. And let me ask you, are you one of these people that, okay, you know you've got the symptoms, but then you write this list, or perhaps you don't even write the list, you write this unachievable to-do list, and then you get stressed out thinking, oh my God, I've got all of these things that I've got to do. Oh no, I don't have enough time. Oh no, I feel overwhelmed with all this stuff that I'm never going to get done. Oh, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do these things? And you start blaming yourself. What's important here is to write a list at the beginning of the day of a few things that you'd like to do, a few core things. And don't become such an achiever that you're trying to do so many things which are unrealistic. So then you're very clear, okay, there are the few things that I'd like to get done today, which I think are realistic, and anything else is a bonus. Yeah? Okay. And we said it, be active at your boundary. So you're operating at, well, that's later down the line. Initially, you're charging up your battery, but then eventually you can, operate to the level that you think you can still keep your health. So not overdoing it, but not underdoing it. And that last point there is, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. Now, what does that mean? That means that when you're doing activities, and we'll talk about this when we talk about mindfulness, it's not the activity itself, but it's your anxious anticipation of the activity, which overstimulates the nervous system and causes a lot of symptoms. So before an activity, we want to stop all those negative thoughts. And then during the activity, we want to do that activity in a calm way. But we'll talk about that in a future session. And there are a minority of people who underdo it. So for most people I find with this condition, they overdo it too easily. They don't listen to their bodies. But there are some people who underdo it. They overpace, as it were. And in those situations, what we can do is just make sure that we don't stay in that kind of feeling of, I can't do too much. As we retrain, very gently beginning to increase that boundary. Yeah? And gentle walking in nature is a great example of that, and getting out of the house. Even if it means, as I said, sitting in your garden or somewhere outside your house, or sitting on a balcony, or going to your coffee shop. Getting out of the house as much as possible trains the brain to not be linked to those anchors around your house that remind it of how ill the body is. And so, what is pacing really teaching us? It's teaching us how we can do things, and it might just be washing the dishes, or playing with your kids, or writing a report, or whatever it may be, is to do things slowly in the moment, letting go of those attachment to results, enjoying the activity, and monitoring your stress levels during an activity. That's the most important thing. And when you notice yourself getting a bit stressed out, drop everything, breathe. Just calm yourself down and do the activity in a more slow-paced way. I've seen people, even on their phones or on a tablet, they're doing something simple, but they're hunched over and they're stressed out, and they can feel their whole body is getting stimulated because they're not doing the activity in a calm way. They're doing it in a tense, tight way in the body. That's something I want to learn. Yeah. And even once we've recovered, we want to use these same principles of pacing, not getting back into that sense of rushed achievement. Okay, so I think in terms of pacing, the key point is that it's having that awareness of when you've hit your buffer, when you've slightly overdone it. And in that moment, it's very tempting to keep going with that activity, but instead drop everything and do a 20 or 30-minute meditation. And you'll find that is able to reset your nervous system. So that's the first point. Second point is, as you're doing activity, do it in a calm, relaxed way, and become aware of if you're doing activity in a stressful way. And you'll know what I mean by that, I'm sure. Yeah. And thirdly, vary your activity based on how you're feeling on a particular day. And fourthly, give time for your battery to recharge. And fifthly, get out of the house as much as possible. Good. Okay, so pacing, I know I haven't spent too long on it, but it's a very important part of your retraining process. It's very tempting as the energy comes back to overdo it. I mean, most people, what do they come back to us for? They say to us, oh, I was doing the retraining, it's going really well, I got, felt really good, and I pushed myself, and then I overdid it, and I'm in a dip now. Now, what do I do now? It hasn't worked. And I say, it's not that it hasn't worked. It's just that you push yourself and your brain got a bit worried that it was too much. And so then it shut down and overstimulated the nervous system and got back into that second cycle of worry, where you've got the symptoms, worry about the symptoms, and we go around in a circle. And just triggered that secondary cycle. And so you just got to go back to retraining the brain again, retraining the insula and the amygdala, calming everything down, and then step by step you'll get the energy back. But when that dip comes, the most important thing is don't panic. Okay. I think that well, we'll go to questions at the end. What I'd also like to do is just have a look at diet as well, because many people say, oh, you're not addressing the physical side of the condition. You're not dealing with diet or supplements, or you're not dealing with certain antivirals that people need to take. And I think, well, yes, we do talk about all of that. This is a holistic program, and if you are doing all this great retraining, but then you're eating a diet which can overstimulate your nervous system, then obviously that's not going to be useful. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll look at some questions. Now, in terms of diet, the first thing I'll say is that a lot of our clients go to a dietitian or nutritionist who puts them on a very strict diet and says, right, the reason you're feeling like this is because of these 2 foods or these 5 foods. You need to cut them out completely, and then you'll heal. And the challenge that you have there is, first of all, it's very difficult to cut a food out completely. Yeah. And even if you do manage to cut out the food completely, you have stress that, I wonder if accidentally I'm going to eat that food. And then if you cut out a food completely, your body takes it as a message that, that food is bad for you. And so when you do reintroduce that food or have it accidentally, you might then have an overreaction to that particular food. So what we're talking about here is generally a healthy diet, and a diet that we found has helped people the most in terms of their recovery. Someone's saying, I keep getting kicked out of the webinar. Is it just me? I think it might be you. I don't think anyone else has got kicked out, unless you want to share that. Someone's saying, I had disconnection a few times. Okay, fine. So if you have a disconnection, obviously that means that it's probably something to do with your internet connection. Otherwise, if it was my internet connection, everyone would get disconnected. Okay. So we want to talk about a generally healthy diet. And also there are certain foods that do cause more stress on the system. So we're going to talk about a number of different foods, but I just want to address things, for instance, like wheat and dairy. Yep. I don't want you to think that wheat and dairy are the cause of your condition. What is happening is that when your body is overstimulated, the body has less resources to deal with foods which take a bit more energy to digest. So if we look at wheat and dairy, we know that wheat and dairy are a relatively new introduction to the modern human diet. They weren't staples in the diet until perhaps 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. And those particular foods, it's not, and some people say, well, perhaps we've adapted in that period of time to those foods, and we know that we have adapted to those foods, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that those foods aren't foods which still are slightly stressful to the system. So generally, if you're healthy, your body can handle those foods, but if you've got low energy and your digestion system is shutting down, then those foods become a bit more draining to the system. Yeah. So we'll just go to what some of those foods can be. So if we're looking at our diet, the foods that we want to eliminate, and these are foods which do either stimulate the system or take a lot of energy to digest. So the first one, caffeine. So caffeine is in coffee and tea, Coca-Cola. We want to shut out caffeine completely. Yep. And I know I said there's no shoulds or musts, but with caffeine, it really doesn't help your system. Now, of course, if you really are tied to having 1 cup of tea a day, then that's fine. But generally, you want to cut out caffeine because your system is already overstimulated. The last thing you want to do is re-stimulate your system with more caffeine, triggering the sympathetic nervous system, tightening the muscles, getting your heart to beat faster. Yeah. And what do you think caffeine does? Yeah, I always think it's quite interesting what people think caffeine does. You're not getting magically some new energy from somewhere. Yeah. You can't rob Peter to pay Paul. You have a certain amount of energy, and all caffeine does is bring that energy forward. It's like taking a loan. So you take a loan from the future to say, right, let me use up more energy now, and inevitably you feel more tired later on if you're having caffeine. So caffeine is a stimulant, so we want to avoid that. Alcohol is technically a depressant, and we know that when the system is in this altered state, it's very difficult for the body to metabolize and get rid of toxins, especially alcohol, which is obviously a toxin. So we want to eliminate alcohol. And remember, most people, once they get back to full health, they can gently reintroduce any of these foods back into their diet. Red meat, now some of you might be surprised by that. We know that red meat contains a huge amount of toxins, is very difficult for the body to actually digest compared to other foods in terms of calories per pound. And generally people have, in my experience, felt better as they come off red meat and instead eat more white meat or fish. Okay. And sugar, we want to really avoid high sugar foods. Now, high sugar foods doesn't just mean sugar. Yeah, we have hidden sugar in our meals everywhere. So that also means drinks which have a lot of sugar in them. And unfortunately, fizzy drinks. And unfortunately, the 0-calorie fizzy drinks are just as bad. So we know from studies that aspartame and some of the other artificial sweeteners are also really bad for us in terms of the effects that it has on the body, even in insulin response. So we want to avoid sugary drinks and even artificially sweetened drinks. And sugar also includes, to some extent, white food. So if you have white bread or white pasta, actually they're not particularly different to sugar in how quickly that wheat, that white flour, gets transformed into sugar in your system. So generally the rule of thumb is avoid foods which are white and have more foods which are green and brown. Yeah. Now, of course, that doesn't include chocolate. But less white foods and more brown and green foods. And then foods that we want to radically reduce, 80-20 rule. So I'm not saying you completely cut it out, but as much as possible you reduce it. So wheat. So wheat obviously contains gluten. So wheat stands for white flour, well, flour in general, bread. Dairy. So we want to reduce specifically cheese and milk. Some yogurt is okay. So having some fresh natural yogurt, unsweetened natural yogurt, some of that is okay because that's got the good bacteria in it. Eggs, I'll sit more on the fence on. Some people find eggs is quite heavy for them to digest. Some people find it's okay. Processed artificial foods. That's where we want to radically reduce artificial foods, especially microwave meals, huge amount of artificial foods in there. We want more fresh foods instead. And I know that some of this is quite controversial because everyone disagrees on what is the right diet for people. But here we're just going on what our experience has been with our clients. And foods to increase a lot. So we want to increase more vegetables and fruit. Now, some people find that raw vegetables and certain fruits don't really agree with them. So you don't have to have necessarily raw vegetables, although some raw vegetables and salads would be good because that's obviously got a lot of nutrition in there. And once again, with all of this, your body will tell you. So when you're about to eat, you can close your eyes and just hover your hands above your food, and your body intuitively will tell you whether this food is good for you or whether it's draining. So after a meal or after a certain food, do you feel okay and the same, or do you feel drained and heavy? And that gives you your clue as to what foods are good for you and what aren't. So you want to increase fruits and vegetables and rice. Yeah, ideally brown rice. If you can't have brown rice, then basmati rice actually has a low glycemic index. So the glycemic index is an index of how quickly certain foods throw sugar into your system. And when we're having bad sleep, overstimulated nervous system, our insulin response is not as effective. So we want to avoid foods which chuck huge amounts of sugar into the system very quickly. So brown rice and basmati rice are okay. Oats. So oats are very slow releasing carbohydrates, so very good for the system. A lot of B vitamins in there. Pulses. Now, unfortunately, pulses is a word that not many people understand, but a food that's very good for you that I'd like you to really experiment with eating more of are essentially lentils and beans. Yeah, whatever fresh lentils and beans you can eat, the more of that you can eat, the better. So having a plate of basmati rice with some beans, lentils, dals, whatever those beans might be, that also is a very healthy thing to do. Nuts. So I'd like you to have a handful of nuts each day to include walnuts and also almonds. So almonds contain the tryptophan, which is the building block of serotonin. So we know it strengthens the mind. So almonds and walnuts, mixed nuts, etc., very good. And seeds as well. So pumpkin seeds and what are the other ones? Pumpkin seeds and just skipped my mind temporarily. Non-wheat whole grains. So there may be other grains that you find work for you and don't drain your energy. So quinoa and other types of things which aren't wheat-based and gluten-based. And finally, fish. And with fish, we know that a lot of fish contain a lot of toxins. So we want, I believe it's freshwater fish, open-caught freshwater fish that haven't been farmed, because farmed fish tend to have all of those toxins and mercury there. Okay, so I know we have a lot of controversial questions coming up as a result of what we're sharing here. And in terms of anti-inflammatory natural supplements. Now, in this condition, one of the core reasons you're experiencing the symptoms you're experiencing is because of over-inflammation. Now, what does over-inflammation mean? Inflammation is the body's response when it's being attacked. And inflammation means it stimulates the immune system in the cells around the body, trying to fight off the invaders. And we know that in this condition, we have an over-inflammatory response. And the inflammation means that the body itself becomes inflamed. So that will cause more pain and aches in the body, just like you have when you have flu. And we also have more inflammation in the brain as well. And therefore, we want to reduce the amount of inflammation that's causing all of these symptoms. Now, that doesn't mean you go out and take anti-inflammatories, because that's not what's going to work longer term. Instead, what we do is take natural anti-inflammatories. So we know that extra virgin cold pressed olive oil is an anti-inflammatory. We know coconut oil is anti-inflammatory. We know turmeric and ginger are anti-inflammatories. So these are all good things and supportive of the body. And some of you may have heard turmeric and its positive healing effects. And the way you take turmeric is very important. So they've experimented with capsules of curcumin, which is the active ingredient in turmeric, but it doesn't have the same absorption. So turmeric is an orange powder, and the maximum absorption is when we take it with a fat. So that might be some milk, or it can be ghee or some oil. So you can even put a bit of turmeric with a bit of coconut oil or extra virgin olive oil, and a pinch of pepper, half a spoon of turmeric, and then slightly warmed. Okay, so just very, very clear. So you take half a spoon of turmeric, a pinch of pepper, a fat, so an oil or a fat, and then slightly warm that together, and then just eat it, just eat the spoon of it. Some people have golden milk, which is essentially a similar thing, turmeric and a bit of pepper warmed in some milk. They call it golden milk. And ginger you can take as tea, ginger tea, so a great tea with some ginger, lemon and honey tea is a great anti-inflammatory for the body as well. And then in terms of other supplements, we know that people have low levels of magnesium in this condition. So you can take a magnesium supplement. Some people are finding that the magnesium spray, which is spraying your tongue, really makes them feel better. So a magnesium supplement's good. B vitamin complex, we want to make sure we're getting our B vitamins, especially B12. So we know, once again, B12 is low in the body. So get a supplement with B12 in it. Vitamin D3, the sunshine vitamin. So vitamin D is something we're all deprived of during the winter months especially. So please do take a vitamin D supplement, perhaps 1,000 or 2,000 international units a day. But if you're not sure, please do check with your doctor. And then a source of omega-3. So if you're not vegetarian, then cod liver oil is a source of omega-3 and 6, or flaxseed oil if you're vegetarian. Okay, so I think there's quite a lot and probably a lot of questions that you've got. So rather than going to the next section, what I'd rather do is go to your questions on how we pace ourselves and then this anti-inflammatory diet that we've been talking about. Okay. Someone's saying, I don't know if you watch Red Dwarf. I used to watch Red Dwarf, actually. There was a whole episode focused on Rimmer's inner critic. It was called Time Wave. How interesting. Thank you for sending that. Diane's asking, when we're doing the 7-step technique, we don't do step 7 for the first 4 whilst we're doing the 5 rounds, correct? Yeah, so I mean, we finish step 6 and you perhaps mimic distracting your mind in something else, and then you go back to starting again. It's just to get your mind in that frame of mind that I visualized, now I don't think about my body again. I imagine just distracting my mind during the day. Someone saying, I've got a lot of tension in my back, neck and shoulders, which makes it impossible to distract from the pain when I'm trying to walk. And instead I've had to say, I accept this pain. But have you thought of anything else that I can say? So first thing is, any healing starts with acceptance. So of course, we accept our pain first. Yeah? So we say to our pain, I accept the pain. Then after that, distraction is still the best policy, because the more that you think about your symptoms, worry about it, have attention on it, the worse it can get. Some people find that they are able to use soften and flow on pain, and it does reduce the pain. Some people find that soften and flow doesn't help them. So you find what works for you, but still that doesn't mean that distraction isn't going to be very powerful. So yes, you say, I accept the pain, let it be there. I can still be calm and centered whilst this pain is in me. At the same time, distraction and engagement in other things is a good therapeutic technique. Pamela's saying, usually when I have that, oh no, I've overdone it feeling, I'm outside with people. Is there a meditation equivalent that can be done with others around you, short of calling an Uber and leaving? Yes. Let's say you're in a situation where you feel that feeling of, oh no, I've overdone it. Then we can use a mindfulness technique that we've created called the slow motion technique. And that's where, I don't want to jump the gun because we're going to talk about it in a future session, but the slow motion technique is essentially breathing slowly and deeply, becoming aware of the present moment, the sounds, the sights around you, what you can feel, breathing slowly and deeply, and doing everything 30 or 40% slower than you normally would. So by breathing slowly and deeply and moving and thinking slowly, it can enable you to just calm the nervous system down. So when you get stressed, the nervous system gets revved, heart rate goes up, think quicker. And if you do everything slowly, it sends a message back to the nervous system to slow down, if you can't stop and meditate then and there. As I mentioned before, Charlotte's saying, I'm an artist and writer, and my problem is getting lost and absorbed in what I'm doing, and then suddenly, bam, I can't move. If that's the case, then your pacing will involve setting time limits and saying, right, I know that I can do half an hour without my symptoms increasing, and then I take some rest. So for some people, they find that pacing is half an hour doing activity, half an hour rest and meditating, half an hour activity, half an hour reading a book. So you find what works for you in terms of your pacing strategy. So Catherine saying, I find soften and flow is great if I've overdone it. Lucy's saying, a lot of guided meditations tell you to breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. I've noticed the Gupta Programme uses more nostril breathing. Okay, so there are so many different breathing techniques out there. None are better than any others, but I do believe, contradict myself, I do believe that breathing in through the nose and out through the nose is more the traditional way of this kind of what we call pranic breathing or chi breathing. So when you're breathing in through the nose and breathing out through the nose and breathing in a measured way, so you're controlling the breathing, that is the most relaxing way. I feel overwhelmed about the activities over the next week or month. How can I keep my mind in the present moment? That's exactly it. You know, when you're watching sport, say football or baseball or whatever it may be, and they have an interview with a manager, and they say, so how are you feeling about this year's league? Do you think you're going to win? What does the manager always say? It's a bit of a cliche, isn't it? They'll say, you know, we're just taking it one game at a time. You know, we're not getting too excited about this, taking the games as they come. And you think, oh, very predictable response. So in the same way, we take one day at a time rather than worrying about all the things we've got to do over the next week or month. Focus on the here and now and take each day as it comes. Megan's saying, I've been able to ride my bike recently, but I can push myself too hard. Can I use a heart rate monitor to alert me when I'm going too hard? That might be one idea. So you could use a heart rate monitor. At the same time, what you don't want to do is get so fixated on the heart rate monitor that you get worried each time it goes up, because that can create anxiety as well. So use it sensibly. Can you be subject to depression if you do overdo it? Overdo it. Yes. Well, I wouldn't say depression. I would say some negative thoughts, because if you overdo it, your brain will suddenly send a huge array of negative thoughts saying, oh my God, you've overdone it. You've done too much. You're going to get a dip. Oh my God, it's all lost. So when that happens, it's important not to panic and stay calm. Heather's saying, I've been going through 2 months of a lot of stress and my sleep is very disturbed and I'm feeling stressed even though the stress is over. How can I start relaxing again? You know, I'll be very honest with you. With all of these different techniques, I'm giving you what enables you to retrain the brain, and it can fit around a normal day. But if you really want to go deeper into this, meditating for longer and more often during the day is the best way of relieving and getting rid of the stress which gets stored up in your body, as well as physical movement. So you need the physical movement to get rid of the stress hormones which build up, which is what's keeping the muscles tight, but regular, long, deep meditation. So I'm saying twice a day. If you find that your whole body is tensed up from some stress, meditate 3 times a day, 4 times a day, 5 times a day. And even ideally, if you can manage it, go on a meditation retreat. So there are many different meditation retreats out there. As you know, I am an advocate of the Art of Living meditation retreats. So in Art of Living, you can do the happiness program, which is the first 3-day program, which is learning some breathing techniques. And then their second program, which is called the Art of Silence course, is when you go away to a retreat center and spend a lot of days just meditating deeply. There's a big, real cleanse for the mind and body. But, you know, there are other organizations out there as well that run these kinds of things. And that's a great way of resetting your nervous system. Something else that I'll say, when it comes to vitamin D and resetting your nervous system, and this isn't for everybody, I understand everyone can't do it, but actually going on holiday to somewhere warm and exposing your skin to the sun is very powerful. And there's a lot of research showing that it's not just vitamin D that we're getting from the sun, but the sun is doing more than just that, because we all feel good, right, when we're in the sun. So the more you can expose your skin to sunlight, the better. Obviously, you don't want to burn your skin, but if you're exposing for 20 minutes a day, even in, you know, very powerful sun, 15-20 minutes a day is not, you know, is going to be okay. But obviously, consult with your doctor as well. Caroline's saying, sometimes I don't have the option to pace myself because I've got a 3-year-old. I totally empathize with that. A lot of people who are retrainers obviously have to look after kids, and that's a constant process. The first thing is, who can we reach out to? Sometimes we don't reach out to get the help and support that we need. Are there friends, family members, our partners, other family people in our family that can support us through our recovery, and being okay with asking for help, because it's the time in our lives when we need that help. Yeah. And secondly, when we are with our child, sometimes there can be inevitable feeling of worrying. Am I doing this right? Am I looking after my child well enough? You know, we're in a generation where there's a lot of parental anxiety about the whole parenting process. And can we pull back on that and just be more relaxed about how we're looking after our children? Good question here about MCS. So with MCS, as you know, the difference with all the stuff we've talked about is simply that at step 6, we imagine a previous memory when we've been exposed to that chemical or mold or whatever it may be, and we felt perfectly fine. Now, how do we pace when it comes to MCS? What it means is that as you retrain and break all the negative thought patterns and visualize health and feeling really positive about being exposed to these chemicals, you don't just go out straight away and expose yourself. But once you feel more confident with the retraining and you feel stronger, very gently you can then pace that re-exposure. Now, how do you do that? Well, you have your tools ready. So you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to re-expose today, and that's okay. And you'll notice some negative thoughts come up. Stop, stop, stop. So you break all the anticipatory thoughts. Then during the exposure, you have the stop, stop, stop ready to stop your mind from going into that reaction. And you stop the thoughts, any of the negative thoughts afterwards. If you notice that a reaction is coming on, you sit down wherever you are, if you can, in that shop or wherever you may be, and you do a soften and flow. And most people find that when they do that, the reaction stops. What do you feel about establishing a baseline activity level and then increasing that incrementally? Yes, it's good to increase activity incrementally, but also being aware that pacing means that there are some days where you have to pull back. So it's not about graded exercise. Graded exercise doesn't work. It is about overall increasing activity levels gently and slowly with no achiever mindset, but pulling back if you're feeling worse on a particular day. I have a 3-year-old and I can't get out of the house as much. Okay, so, parks and beach are a drive away. Can you have more activities with your child than involve being outside the house? So it doesn't have to be that you sit somewhere and you're reading. Can playtime with your child be more of that outdoors? Does chocolate have caffeine? Yes, chocolate does have caffeine, but it doesn't have a huge amount of caffeine, so I think it's okay as long as you're not gorging on massive bars of it. Yes, and we know that dark chocolate is better for you than normal chocolate, so having some dark chocolate can be okay. Is cooking with alcohol okay? I've never been asked that before. I don't know if cooking in heat breaks down the alcohol. I don't think it does. So I would say refrain from that as much as possible. Is fruit okay? Yep, fruit's okay. Yep, basmati rice is okay. Baranji saying, don't you think everyone's different and some of us really need coffee to get up, for example, and some need eggs to feel energized? Yeah, I think with eggs, I'm on the fence with eggs. Some people do find it beneficial. Some people find it draining. So that's why I did say that you adapt this diet according to what works for you, what gives you energy versus what drains your energy. At the same time, with caffeine, some of us have got into that roller coaster. So you know that caffeine itself is not giving you extra energy. It's overstimulating your system so that you feel less energy later. So you might think that coffee is helping you, but you could just be riding a coffee roller coaster where you get more energy, but then you're on a bigger downer, so you need more caffeine to go back up, and it's an up and down process. Yeah. What are pulses? Yeah, so pulses are lentils and beans. What about Charlotte asking, what about goat's milk? Yep, if you find goat's milk is better for you, then that's okay. Oops. Oats contain gluten. Right, so what it is that the amount of gluten in oats is it's very slight. I don't believe it will impact on you or make you have any kind of reaction if you're gluten intolerant. If you're absolutely very badly gluten intolerant, then maybe it will, but the amount of gluten in oats is very, very tiny. Sunflower seeds, yes, that was the word I was looking for. Pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds, you got your omegas in there. Sesame seeds, also very good for you as well. But we don't want to get into that paranoia of, oh no, I have to eat chia seeds. Oh, I haven't had my chia seeds today. That's why I'm feeling worse. Is a vegan diet okay? Yes. In fact, I'm pretty much 80 or 90% vegan. You know, many people recover whether they've got a vegan diet or not a vegan diet. It doesn't seem to make much difference. As long as you're getting the things that you need. So with a vegan diet, getting a good iron source, making sure you're getting your iron and some of those other vitamins, as long as you're getting those things, then it's absolutely fine. I've been on an antidepressant for many years. Should I try to eliminate this? What I always advise is with any medicines that you're on, keep the level the same as you retrain. And once you're feeling more healthy, very gently, in association with your doctor, reduce the dose very slowly, because there is an addictive quality to most antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs. Yeah. Caroline's saying buckwheat is good. So buckwheat is another non-gluten grain. Half a teaspoon of turmeric. How much is that in grams? So I believe half a teaspoon would be 2 or 3 grams of turmeric. Yeah, 1 cup of coffee, if you absolutely find it definitely makes you feel better, then that can be okay. Alex saying, I find that even when I'm pacing very well and I'm feeling great, if I get a cold or I get my period, then I still dip afterwards, not during the cold, but always after. Why is this, and is this common? Yes, so when you have a cold or a flu, that is a shock to the system, and you don't need to do the stops on your thoughts about the symptoms of the cold or the flu. Afterwards, because of the altered state of the body, it may take some time to get better, and that's when you go back into the tools, and with regular meditation and you know, all of these different lifestyle things we're talking about, it should mean that you can come back to normal health. But yes, in our altered state, in our weakened immune system state, sometimes these colds and flus might make us feel more tired than it might do to someone else. Okay, so we're going to be wrapping up. So I just want to answer any questions that are of a different, so I won't be able to answer all your questions, but I'll just answer new ones. Georgina is saying, I sometimes find the 7 steps difficult to do by myself. Is there a short recording we could have on our phones to guide us through? Also, I'm amazed at how the Soften and Flow works. I love the Meaning of Life app. Good. So with the 7 steps, what you could do is you could record the bit that I did in session 2, where I talk you through it. You could record that and have it on your phone, or you could record it yourself. So in order to guide yourself through it, you could make a recording of yourself going through the 7 steps. Someone say, I can't go out because it's too cold and it goes right through me. So in that case, sit very close to a window, so you're getting lots of natural daylight. The reason we're saying go outdoors is to get the daylight, which impacts on our rhythms and our sleep, and it makes us feel more awake, and it makes us feel fresher. The fresh air is very important as well. So just sitting near a window if you can't be outside for long periods. So I'm saying I can't distract from the pain because it's preventing me from walking. That is the main advice. So when it comes to pain management, there is firstly deep acceptance of the pain, and then secondly, engagement of the mind in something else. Yeah, those are the two main ways. I have issues with low self-esteem. Any suggestions to build this up over time? Yes, if you watch day 16 of the Meaning of Life experiment, then that can help you with that. In fact, for your fun work for this week, because a lot of people are mentioning these types of topics, I'd like you to watch day 9 of the Meaning of Life experiment. And day 9 is all about acceptance. And that leads me on to this question, which is Sydney saying, can you comment on the balance between accepting what is versus actively manifesting and cultivating a different future? Some of the steps imply focusing on the future, while other steps focus on accepting the present. How do we do both? We visualize the future in the present moment. That's the difference. So we deeply accept how we're feeling now to remove any negativity. And from that strength that comes from an acceptance of where we are now, we then choose and visualize the direction in which we want to head. So they're not mutually exclusive. They work together. And that is explained in session 9 of the Meaning of Life. So watch video 9 of the Meaning of Life. Karen's saying, I've had fibro for 15 years. I struggle to believe that it will work for me. You still go through the motions, but you see, when you're saying going through the motions, it's not about doing it like a robot and just going through the motions without experiencing each step. So what you do is, if you're finding it hard to have that belief, imagine how you would feel if you did have the belief. Imagine how you would feel at step 3 and step 4. Imagine how you would feel at step 6 if you visualized health. It's all about using the power of imagination. Okay? Seema saying, I have chronic pain. When I overdo it, I tend to feel it 24 hours later. When the pain increases, yes, you can do the soften and flow technique, meditation, and then retraining to stop your mind thinking about it. Pamela's saying, I've been using a Fitbit to help with pacing. It buzzes when I've hit the number of steps that I can normally do during a day without dipping. Any thoughts about this? Yes, that's fine, as long as you recognize that each day will potentially be different. If you're in the middle of a dip, then the number of steps that you can take might be different to that particular day. Another day. Neil saying, on the depression question, I have experience of long-term overdoing it, using adrenaline to function and ignoring the symptoms, causing 3 months of depression. Interestingly, when I suffer from depression, all my symptoms disappeared. The brain can only focus on one thing at a time. Yeah, so sometimes when we push our system too hard, see, anxiety and depression are sides of a coin. They're like the twins, as it were. If you have too much anxiety over a long period of time, eventually it will turn into depression. Is there an option to purchase just the 30-minute meditations? No, they come in a package. So if you want the downloads of the MP3s, they come as a package of the 10, 20, and 30-minute meditations, which I think you're all emailed a link to. Are there any meditations which are useful for people with pain apart from the soften and flow? All of the meditations will help the pain, but soften and flow is the main one. How intense is the happiness course from the Art of Living? Well, now it's 3 days and 3 hours a day, and it's obviously very relaxing. There's nothing, stimulating there. So if you can handle three hours a day for 3 days, then I really recommend doing the Art of Living happiness program. Would sunbeds work the same as vitamin D from the sun? Yes, we do know that sunbeds do give you vitamin D, but please be very cautious with your use of that. Valerie's saying, I've been meditating 30 minutes morning and evening for 6 weeks, and I'm amazed at the internal shift it has brought on mentally and physically. I feel settled, grounded, and I missed 2 mornings during this time, and I could sense a difference on those days. Yeah, so that's why I'm saying it's very powerful if we can meditate for 30 minutes in the morning before breakfast, 30 minutes in the evening, a soften and flow during the day. It's just really nicely teaching that nervous system to calm down. Very powerful. So a lot of people are asking about sleep. So someone just remind me at the beginning of next week that we'll be talking about sleep. Some people. So on the alcohol question, some people saying that alcohol does break down at high temperatures. Okay, that might be something to look into. Someone's saying not all oats contain gluten. It's contaminated by wheat. Yes, because often they use the same assembly lines and factories to produce the wheat. So that might be where the cross-contamination comes in. I wasn't aware of that. I'm having resistance to doing the retraining. You know, when you're having resistance, change it. Change the retraining exercise and ask your mind, what would I like to do? If I was going to design this myself, how would I do it? And when you do it that way, then you can no longer have a resistance to something that you've designed yourself. Someone's saying dark chocolate has much higher levels of caffeine, so be aware. Okay. So does using your imagination work if you intellectually agree with the hypothesis, but you really don't believe the positive statements that you're making to yourself during the retraining? Yes. So fake it until you make it. When you imagine how you would feel if you did believe, the brain can't tell the difference between what's real and imagined, and that's what makes the impact. Someone just commenting, B12 supplements are very important for vegans. Yeah. Caroline saying a good breakfast is porridge with chia seeds. Okay, those chia seeds made an appearance again. Cooked, and then after cooking, add toasted nuts and seeds, some chopped banana, live natural yogurt, and sprinkled with cinnamon. Yes, so if you look at that, for instance, so you've got your porridge, so you've got a slow-releasing carbohydrates and B vitamins. Chia seeds contain your omegas. Your nuts and seeds have got a lot of vitamins and minerals that your body needs, including magnesium. And your seeds also contain your omegas. Your chopped banana, lots of nutrients there. Live natural yogurt, so getting your good bacteria. And cinnamon, very powerful for the sugar response system. So enables your system to balance the sugar levels in your body. So a good breakfast there. Someone talking about the fruit. So we know that fructose is the same as sugar. Yeah. When they've done studies on diabetics, they found that taking in fruit does not impact on the blood sugar levels as much as actual, processed sugar. And the reason for this is that when we're eating fruit, there is fiber in the fruit. So the breakdown of that particular fruit therefore means that it doesn't have such a high glycemic index as other foods. Now, if you so for instance, actually, it's better to eat fruit in its whole version than it is to juice fruit or have a smoothie. Yeah. And let's just think about this logically. If you take fruit and you produce a smoothie, what you've done is actually remove the that digestion process that naturally means that that sugar is released more slowly into your system. So it is not correct that having fruit is the same as just having sugar. That is incorrect. Actually, the fiber in the fruit means that it releases slower into your system, and studies on diabetes have shown that it doesn't have such a strong effect on the body. So fruit is okay, but once again, you decide, am I having this fruit, and actually does it make me feel not so good? In which case you reduce that particular thing. Alison saying, I cut out coffee a few years ago and it made me feel so much better, but it took about 10 days during which I felt worse. I suggest that the people who want to keep drinking coffee, they try stopping it for a week and see how they feel. It made a huge difference to my life. Yeah, so it takes about 7 to 10 days for the caffeine to work its way out of your system and your caffeine receptors to reset themselves. But it certainly will be worth it. And you don't have to come off cold turkey, perhaps just reduce the amount that you have. But really, for us in this altered state, I don't see any benefits that come from having it. Danny's saying, I've had CFS for 15 years and this program is working for me. So hopefully that will give you the thing. What can you say as the source of magnesium, omega-3 and turmeric? Are there any brands? No, so magnesium supplements you can find at your local health store. As I said, the spray that people put on their tongue, that's something which people are finding very positive. Your omega-3, that would be from cod liver oil or from flaxseed oil or chia seeds. And turmeric, that's not branded, that's just a herb that you can also buy at your local health food store. Ideally organic turmeric, which is just like a yellow powder, and that's how you can consume that. Brilliant. Okay, so we've been through a lot of content today. Hopefully you've found it useful. And next week we'll be talking about sleep, and then we'll be looking at some of the lifestyle aspects of how you can support your retraining and get back to health and happiness. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next Monday evening. Thank you and goodbye.